We begin with breaking news. President-elect Trump will be sentenced in Manhattan criminal court next week.
The date set for January 10th, 1 week from today, and just 10 days before he takes the oath of office for a second term as president. Alice Gaynor covered the trial. She's here with the latest after the multiple delays in this case.
That's right, and it's looking like no jail time. Judge Juan Merchan's order indicated he does not intend to sentence the defendant, President-elect Trump, to jail time. Trump can also appear virtually or in person for sentencing at 9:30 a.m. next Friday. On May 30th, a jury found Trump guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree with the intent to defraud, commit, or conceal a conspiracy to promote a presidential election by unlawful means. Sentencing was originally scheduled for July, but that was moved to September as a result of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity. It was then pushed again to November after the presidential election at the defense's request, and pushed back once again as both sides figured out how to proceed. In his 18-page ruling, the judge wrote, "This court finds that presidential immunity from criminal process for a sitting president does not extend to a president-elect." Prosecutors had suggested the judge wait until after Trump's term in office to sentence him. But the judge said he needed to sentence him within a reasonable time following the verdict, noting the defendant needs to be able to be permitted to make every available appeal, which Trump can only do once he is sentenced. Now, he has until January 5th to let the judge know if he'll appear in person or not. Dick, Christine?
So no jail time. But this is a sentencing, so what is he sentenced to?
So, right, he was facing up to 4 years behind bars, probation, fines, but the judge found what was more viable was what's called an unconditional discharge, so no strings attached, essentially nothing. But remember, Trump remains a convicted felon.
You said whether or not he will appear in person or not, so he has an option, and would that other option be to appear virtually?
That's right. The judge is going to allow him to appear virtually given everything that's going on before the inauguration, so we'll see what he decides. He has to let him know soon. So.
Okay. Well,
all right.
And I also want to point out we haven't heard yet back from Trump's people. Manhattan DA's office is declining to comment.
All right. Thanks very much, Alice.
Alice Gaynor, thank you.
All right, joining us now to discuss this is Fordham Law School Professor Cheryl Bader. Thank you for joining us, Cheryl. You just heard us talking to Alice about this unconditional discharge. I'm not sure I've ever heard that before. I guess the question that's begged is, if it's a sentencing, it doesn't sound like there's much of a sentence.
Exactly. An unconditional discharge is sort of like a get-out-of-jail-free card. When we talk about discharge, right, we're saying that he's not going to be held and incarcerated. And sometimes, and more often, there's a conditional discharge. In other words, that you have to do sort of treatment programs, probation, community service, like cleaning up, in the subway or the parks. And so this would be without any condition. So he would just be released. Of course, he'd still be a convicted felon, but there wouldn't be any punishment, other than the conviction that's associated with it.
Is there anything left for the president's legal team here to consider in order to possibly postpone the sentencing even further?
I mean, they may ask the judge and say, look, Judge, we want to present you with certain things about, Trump and more about him and who he is. But, this judge knows Trump quite well. In fact, in his decision, in part, the decision was to rule on certain motions that the Trump team made. And one of the motions was a motion to dismiss the case in what we call the interest of justice. And one of the factors that the judge considers is the character of the defendant. And so the judge wrote, interestingly, that, that Trump's character is not something that would speak favorably to dismiss the case. And so this judge, knows who Trump is, and I don't think there's really reason to postpone it. Plus, the Trump team now can move on, and they can appeal Judge Merchan's various rulings in the case.
Cheryl, this case, it's not a minor case, but it's certainly not something that you usually see rise all the way to, let's say, the U.S. Supreme Court. But they've spoken a lot about presidential immunity. Do you think this is the kind of case that would go up the ladder again?
I think that the Trump team will bring this case up the ladder again. Judge Merchan rejected the claim that this was that presidential immunity should apply here. Remember, the hush money payments, this was all conduct that was done, before Trump was president. And certainly it's not within the gamut of official duties to make hush money payments. And so I'd be surprised if, even if it goes up, if the Supreme Court, even under its broad ruling, were to consider this to be immune.
Yeah, and on that note, Cheryl, it was interesting when Alice said that this court finds that the presidential immunity from criminal process for a sitting president does not extend to that for a president-elect. So getting it in there under the wire. Cheryl Bader, professor at Fordham Law, thank you so much for your time.
Good to be here.
Thank you. And we have continuing coverage on the sentencing for President-elect Trump with updates streaming on CBS News New York. And look for all our reporting on his hush money trial on our website, cbsnewyork.com.